I'm hyped. Let's go.
Me too. What's up, everybody? It's Saber King here. I'm back to talk about something that barely anybody remembers I talked about a couple of years ago, and that was Spider-Man, the new animated series, that CGI cartoon that has flown under people's radars over the past almost 2 decades now, but it really got a massive kick up back a couple years ago, and that's thanks to this man right here, my guest, my newest companion of the series, Evan, leader of the Spidey Squad.
Honored. Thank you so much for having me, dude. What's up, true believers? All you TNAS fans out there and all you spectacular Spidey fans out there yourselves.
Yes.
This is an honor for me to be here, featured with someone as kind-hearted as this awesome man, and just talking about this series and the fact that it's getting more recognition nowadays instead of back in the day in 2003 where it was considered kind of a flop for some people, but now it's kind of getting a second look at it and actually getting more recognition from the majority of the public is just a wonderful thing to see.
Absolutely. And again, I think I like to think that you were kind of the catalyst for that, because you made that awesome video and you just went into all of these little details on what made the series really unique and stand out to you in a way that I've only seen people do with Spectacular Spider-Man, because like you said, and like every other comic book fan, there's always that one interpretation of a comic book show everybody likes, but they forget that this one came out and it was kind of doing things that future cartoons wouldn't do, and that was Spider-Man TNAS, which I feel bad because of your video. I actually went back and watched the full series because I never watched this show as a kid. I saw commercials for it and I saw how dark it was, and I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm ready for a Dark Spider-Man show. But then it just disappeared, and I was wondering what happened to it. So, but yeah, no. So let's actually just get into that, man. It's like, out of all of the Spider-Man shows, like, not Spectacular Spider-Man, but TNAS could possibly be coming back. You know?
Oh, yes.
How hype is that? It's like
bro.
What kind of a testament does that say?
Dude, like, okay, so of course, just to get the elephant out in the room, like, of course, everyone wants Spectacular Spider-Man Season 3. I want Spectacular Spider-Man Season 3. That's a fantastic show. It's one of the best representations of the Spider-Man character we've ever seen in an animated format. And now we have an amazing Spider-Man animated movie with Into the Spider-Verse, which is getting a sequel in 2022, which we can all look forward to. But in Spider-Man cartoons nowadays, it's just been so lackluster recently with Ultimate Spider-Man, which was average. And now we have Marvel's Spider-Man on Disney XD, which is not really the best Spider-Man show, in my opinion. It surprisingly does have its fans, but I just don't prefer that interpretation of the character. But the most recent news that has been brought up on Twitter, funny enough, in case you guys missed it, is that Mainframe Animation, who is the studio behind the creation and who developed Spider-Man, the new animated series back in 2003 on MTV, they were recently asked if they would be up to creating a season 2 for the show, and they said that they would love to. We just need Marvel Animation and Marvel in general to greenlight the project for them to have it go ahead and have it actually be created directly from Mainframe and have a possible continuation of the series, which ended 17 years ago. And of course, there's all those other great Spider-Man shows out there, like the 90s cartoon, of course, the classic 60s cartoon.
Yes.
But this is the most interesting thing that has happened in the most recent years relating to Spider-Man media in animated format. Because, like you said, it was so dark. It was different. It was super gritty compared to like the more lighthearted tone that you would usually think a Spider-Man cartoon would feature. And that was because that was back in the day before Marvel and Disney were merged together, creating these more, I would say, family-friendly or kid-oriented shows like that of Ultimate Spider-Man and Marvel's Spider-Man on Disney XD. And Spectacular Spider-Man had those very mature tones too, but also kept the lighthearted feeling in there while blending it with the hardcore action that you would expect from a Spider-Man show. But the new animated series doubled down on that with actually creating a much more graphic, detail-oriented cartoon than you would expect for Spider-Man to have, with 3D animation. One season, so sadly it didn't get a season 2, but it did have a solid 13-episode lineup for season 1, which had a lot of interesting things relating to new characters that were never introduced before in Spider-Man media, directly into the show's lore, as well as basing it off solely and a little bit loosely off of the Raimi Spider-Man movies based off the first film in 2002. It was originally going to be an Ultimate Spider-Man show, but then it was morphed into kind of a loose adaptation of the movie, setting it in that universe, but kind of building off of it in its own unique way. And there's just so much potential for what a season 2 could be, and I am just blown away that Mainframe actually came out and said that they would be up for making another version of this show to continue it where it left off.
Me too, man. It's not often you see a studio like that really hold some kind of nostalgia and enjoyment. Just to have that be brought back by people's questions, asking them, would you like to come back and do this? Because most of the time, people will just tell you, we love to, but we don't know if we can because of these reasons or legal battles and such. But Mainframe was definitely more forthcoming. They were like, yes, of course we would love to, but we just need to get Marvel's attention. And all the reasons you listed right there, I think if it were to come out today, season 2, I think it could be even better than what season 1 laid down 17 years ago, because I didn't notice this as you were saying it, but I think the reason why maybe most people like you and like I love TNAS so much is because it did have a little bit of that Sam Raimi style to it that unfortunately he couldn't go all in on in the 3 movies. He kind of had to keep it to a campy, sort of cheesy, but mature enough superhero film. But with the show, it could do whatever it wanted. It could tell stories that you would never get to see Sam tell in his movies. So I really like that, and I think if it were to come back for a season 2, it would definitely be a top-tier contender, and I feel like, as of now, it would have so many advantages to work on, from modern-day technology, modern writing, and just how the landscape of animation has changed dramatically in the past 17 years.
Totally, dude. That was the biggest, downturn factor for some people, is that, the animation looks a bit choppy, or it doesn't look as clean as, say, a cartoon like Spectacular Spider-Man. But keep in mind, it was new technology back in the early 2000s. It was a brand new type of animated show that no one has tried to create before, specifically for a superhero. Yes. And now it's funny enough that we actually kind of got something similar to that recently in this generation with Batman, with, if you remember, Beware the Batman.
Yes.
They kind of had that 3D animated show similar to the style of the new animated series. And even furthermore, for Spider-Man, they did do a kind of 3D-centered episode in the Ultimate Spider-Man show at one point where he tried to travel across different dimensions and he met Spider-Man 2099, where it had 3D animation in his universe. So that was a cool way to try to holler back to TNAS's animation, but also show what a current 3D animation would look like in today's standards for a cartoon. And of course, that was blown all out of the water with Into the Spider-Verse, creating a breathtaking animated perspective for Spider-Man in a movie, making it look like a comic book brought to life with the onomatopoeias for the comic format and the different stylizing of the art styles for each dimension.
Yes.
Just like Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, the video game, and also the Ultimate Spider-Man video game, where it made it feel like those comics were being brought to life.
Yes.
And what TNAS was trying to do, the new animated series, was, like you said, it was trying to build off upon the stylization and the overall aesthetic look that the Sam Raimi movie tried to adapt in the first movie in 2002, with kind of a darker but also more vibrant tone than you would see in a standard comic book movie from, say, the MCU, where they're all great in their own unique way, but some of them do have kind of a similar, color palette / artistic look to all, blend well within the same universe. But this, with the new animated series, it tried to blend the stylization of the Raimi movies while also paying homage to the Ultimate Spider-Man comic, since it was originally going to be an adaptation of that series, but then they brought it into an animated 3D format and then totally went off the rails with it, with these crazy characterizations of villains and characters that we already know of, like the Lizard and Electro, but also bring in new characters that add in their own unique style, like Shakata, and also, if you remember, the crazy Psycho Stalker Christina, which was a crazy episode. And I really do love what they did with certain aspects specifically, even though I'm not a big fan of the finale of the show.
Yes.
I just love where it went with the Games twins, the Mind Control twins, and the stylizing that they did have within those episodes. So there were so many different varieties of storytelling and narrative animation that they included all at the same time, blending all these things together to drive the story forward, but also showcase Spider-Man in a way that we've never seen before, which is why, in my opinion, the web swinging in that show, or the way that Spider-Man moves, is so fluid compared to any other cartoon that I've seen at all. Like, even some of the swinging animation that he does in that show is like, that is exactly how I think Spider-Man should move, and the way that he goes about it when trying to either save someone or just swing from point A to point B just looks incredible with the animation that they did. And if they were to actually update that nowadays for a season 2, it would just be insane. And again, that was early 2000s technology, trying to fully make it in a complete CGI rendering format. But now, since clearly they have more assets and resources to use, I think that there is a huge amount of potential for what the overall aesthetic look could be for an updated season 2 of TNAS. It would be insane.
I absolutely agree with you, man. You've hit the nail on the head many, many times, and I would just be floored to see what the potential TNAS would have if it were brought back, and if it were to build off of what season 1 did, specifically the hated finale, which I do not like myself, but I respected that, okay, they went out in a way that I don't think any other show at that time would have the balls to go off, because most superhero shows back then would just end on cliffhangers that would not get resolved in any future format with their returns or just with any continuations. But with Spider-Man TNAS, he quits being Spider-Man. And what's great about that is he did that. He quit being Spider-Man before Sam Raimi had his Peter Parker quit being Spider-Man for a temporary amount of time. But I really liked how it was handled more in TNAS, because he quits being Spider-Man because of all of the harm he's caused, of how relationships have just not been working, and it feels like it's not less of a it's not much of a burden on him, but more it's just a curse that he can't get over. So that's why he throws the suit into the ocean, and the last thing he sees is Spider-Man in his reflection, like, almost like, okay, this is goodbye forever. So if season 2 were to come out, I would be so fascinated to see how they would handle that. Like, what has Peter been doing all of this time since he quit being Spider-Man, and have things actually been getting better or worse since he quit being Spider-Man?
It would be so interesting, because like, we know that they had a season 2 planned originally all the way back in 2003. Sadly, because of the low ratings on MTV, it didn't get a second season, and then it was therefore canceled. But what the original plan was, from what I've heard on, rumblings online, but also because of what the original plan was and layout was from Mainframe and MTV themselves, and it didn't help either, because MTV sadly botched the method of how the episodes were aired. They aired them in the wrong order, which is infamously known for TNAS, is that the reason why people don't know exactly what order the episodes were on chronologically is because MTV themselves debuted them in the wrong order, which was so strange back then. But hopefully, if it were to come back, that would be fixed. But basically, for season 2, what the original plan was, supposedly, is that Peter was still going to be in college, probably like a couple years ahead. Maybe like since he was a freshman in college in season 1, he probably would have either been like a sophomore, junior, or possibly in his final year of college. And he would have come back with a newer suit, which would have been freaking awesome to see, as well as introduce new original characters in the show, like that of Shikata and the Mind Control twins and the Biker twins and all that. And they would have had more original characters to lay in with the show that introduced originality and complexity with them interacting with Peter and Spider-Man as both characters. Infamously, one of the best episodes of the show was Keeping Secrets with Talon, who was supposed to be this universe's version of Black Cat. She might have made a return in season 2 and possibly reveal her identity to Harry in a really cool way and see how that would have meshed together. But it would also have taken away and kind of diverged itself away from that of the Raimi movies. And instead, it would have focused more on the overall narrative that was implemented in the Ultimate Comics, which would have been very interesting to see how they would take more inspiration from that series compared to the films. The also problematic factor is that it kind of coincided with Spider-Man 2, which was ramping up production at the time because the first film did so well and they were trying to get the jump on the second film immediately, and it came out in 2004. But it was also trying to figure out which classic villains they could implement within the show, like they had Kraven and Silver Sable already, but Doc Ock was the main villain of Spider-Man 2, so they couldn't use him in the series. So there were all these factors, which is another reason why the show didn't do so well, because it was trying to coincide with the scheduling of the movies, as well as trying to base it off the film of the first series in the Raimi franchise and the Ultimate Comics at the same time. But basically, season 2 would have rectified all that complexity, make it much more simple, and focus directly on what made the Ultimate Comics so special in the first place, and also just see how it could go from there, with Peter coming back as Spider-Man, fighting some new foes, and actually possibly revealing his true identity to Mary Jane somewhere down the line, like he did in the finale, but it was all in his head and it didn't really happen. So if he actually really came back and fully revealed his identity to MJ, that would have been a very cool narrative plot point to discover, unfold throughout the show. And my main hypest point is that they would have brought in original characters that would be amazing to see in 3D animation for this series, is characters like Mysterio, Vulture, and possibly Venom, meaning the symbiote in the black suit would be involved as well in this show if it was to get a season 2. And the biggest factor now is that since Mainframe has expressed interest into making a season 2, it would all be fantastic in the best ways possible if they were actually to directly continue where the show left off in season 1. But now we have all these factors that the Raimi movies are finished. We're now focusing on MCU Spider-Man in the films. We also have the current Spider-Man show going on, Marvel Spider-Man Disney XD. Season 3 of that is coming out soon, Maximum Venom in April, I believe. I'm not excited for that, but
me neither.
The most possible scenario that could happen for this is that if Mainframe is interested and Marvel sees that and notices how people actually do want this show to make a revival in one way or another, or just get a Spider-Man show made by Mainframe, they could do a brand new series, another new animated series, a rebooted series of Spider-Man within Mainframe's animation styling and narrative storytelling, however they want to actually portray their story within this show, and not based off the Raimi movies, but instead have it be its own brand new original universe, and then just completely reiterate it with brand new animation, storytelling, characters, and just expand on what made the first season so great, but fully dive into that within a brand new rebooted Spider-Man series from Mainframe. Not MTV. They wouldn't be involved in this. I hope not.
No.
But if it was like possibly a Netflix original series or something on Disney Plus instead, that would be phenomenal. It's a pipe dream, but we really hope it could happen.
No, absolutely. Well, some pipe dreams have led to them becoming realities, because we live in a day and age now, unlike back then, where companies really care financially what the audience has to say about these properties that come out. That's why Disney brought back the Clone Wars. That's a big example right now. They brought back the Clone Wars because they knew, okay, people still love this series. They want to see it conclude, and we've already had Rebels concluded, Rise of the Resistance, that's not going so well for us, so let's bring that back, let's conclude it, and give closure to these fans. So I think it would definitely be possible for Marvel and Disney to somehow collaborate and get a season 2 revival, or even just reboot the series, but have it expand upon season 1, like you said, to really, really give us a Spider-Man show that we haven't had since then, because it seems like, unfortunately, because Spider-Man has to be aimed more at kids these days, we're not allowed to experience that mature, dark, and gritty side that Spider-Man had, especially in the Ultimate Comics. And I really feel this would be a big opportunity for them to capitalize on just giving fans a new Spider-Man, because we get a new Spider-Man show all the time, but ever since Spectacular, it feels like it's all just been trying to be something that I don't think audiences want it to be.
Absolutely, because what is the most concerning problem that I've seen in the animated shows is that they're trying to obviously, of course, keep it more family-oriented or kid-oriented, but they're taking away the aspects of what makes Spider-Man so special, is that, yes, he is, like in these newer shows, Ultimate Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man, he's a high school student, but they're treating him like he's a kid. Like, instead of actually, he is a kid, but the best thing about him is that he's a kid who deals with the realities of adulthood. He's mature. He deals with mature problems, financial struggles, relationship problems, job, problems, and trying to keep all that under wraps within his superhero persona. And they've taken that away within these newer shows and instead just made him like a side character as like a cool individual to team up with the Avengers or the, other superheroes in the Marvel universe, instead of focusing him on what makes Peter so special at the core, not just Spider-Man as a character, but mainly Peter Parker. And that was one of the biggest highlights about the new animated series, is that it was so well-rounded and well-focused on Peter's personal life and dealing with that and trying to balance his relationships with MJ, Harry, Indy, but then also try and be a hero as Spider-Man and dealing with college and trying to get paid at his job at the Daily Bugle. So all this great stuff was showcased so thoroughly in TNAS and Spectacular Spider-Man and the 90s show, but has since been removed in the newer, series like Marvel's Spider-Man and Ultimate Spider-Man. And what would have been so perfect is that they showcase that in its entirety, where they don't leave anything out to say, well, this might not be what kids are interested in. No, they kept that in for kids, specifically for the MTV show, because MTV thought that this is what kids will want to focus on the most. It was hip, it was cool, it was young. That was literally their mindset, which is why they even had talks to take Aunt May out of the show entirely, because they thought that an older person would shift away focus on the younger vibe the show provided, which I don't think it would have, but I understand what they're talking about, because they want to focus on a young adult-oriented audience. And it worked, in my opinion. It worked so well. Because
Absolutely.
Spectacular Spider-Man had, like, mature adult themes, with Peter dealing with, obviously, his relationships with Gwen, Harry, Liz, MJ, even the cast in the school, like Flash Thompson, who had a great character portrayal in that series. And less so in this one, because he was just showing off as like a one-off character in one episode for TNAS. But the point is that they had such interesting character interactions that kept things grounded and real, instead of like, oh, there's some aliens we got to go fight, or I got to team up with the Avengers to go save the day with them. Here's my idol, Tony Stark. Let me go team up with him and fight alongside the other Avengers at the core. And that's not really what I would like to see personally in the Spider-Man show, and that's why whenever anyone asks what's the best Spider-Man show, you always hear Spectacular Spider-Man or the 90s series. But the reason why us fans of TNAS always you should give this a chance is because it focuses on all those factors in spades. One of the highlight episodes for me is the Royal Scam, the Kingpin episode, where Peter is literally just trying to go see MJ at a play. That's literally the whole point of the episode, alongside of Kingpin trying to crack this, data chip to try and rob banks and just try and basically become even more rich and wealthy and powerful. But at the core, really, Peter is trying to save the day, but mainly make sure that he is there for MJ at her play. And that's the great factor that, we've heard time and time again, is that the worlds of Spider-Man and Peter Parker collide are the best stories that you could have with that character. When Peter Parker wins, Spider-Man loses. When Spider-Man wins, Peter Parker loses. And we saw that throughout the 13 episodes of this show. Every single one of them had that in spades. Same thing with Spectacular, same thing with the 90s show. But truly, if you want something on a much more gritty and mature and realistic perspective, in terms of a narrative storytelling with 3D animation that really drove the point home, this was it. This show had it all. And obviously, you know, nothing to take away from Spectacular Spider-Man, nothing to take away from the 90s show. Those series are both phenomenal in their own way. But I just really appreciate how true they were to Spider-Man's character in this show while keeping it mature, gritty, but also take the step forward and see how can we push the narrative perspective of Spider-Man and Peter further in a darker tone that most people haven't seen before. And that's what made this show so unique, in my opinion. And granted, recently with Into the Spider-Verse, in the movies, we got that too, with Miles Morales dealing with realistic scenarios and problems as a kid, as a, you know, new upcoming student in this new school that he goes to, and teaming up with interdimensional spider people is a crazy thing to think about. But they never took that, you know, bigger spectacle of fighting villains like Kingpin and female Doc Ock and Green Goblin and Prowler away from the core story of Miles Morales is becoming Spider-Man. He is growing as a kid into a man, into Spider-Man. And you see his maturity develop throughout the film in such a unique way that truly makes him the standout character of that film. Because in reality, Into the Spider-Verse is a Miles Morales movie. It's not a Peter Parker and Miles movie. It's not a Spider-Man team-up movie. No, it's a Miles Morales movie. And that's why at the core of this show, the new animated series, it was a Peter Parker cartoon. It was a Peter Parker show that truly, you know, beautified and fully developed everything that makes Peter Parker so wonderful and relatable to all of us, but also going into further perspectives that we have never seen before in terms of tone and, you know, just narrative storytelling in general. And that's what made it so special for me. That's why it still is, to this day, my favorite Spider-Man show. And if we were to get a second season, like the dream right now, if it directly continued where the first season left off into a completely season 2 refined series, that would be amazing. But I think with all the factors going in, with the Raimi films not happening anymore, MTV not distributing the series, and all the narrative perspectives that went into the first season, I think a rebooted series would work more, but it would truly be the best possible outcome for this show to happen. It's just, if it got more of a chance to shine from people and give it a chance, that is all we could ask out of, you know, just this show in general getting perceived by the public in a much bigger spectacle, because it definitely deserves more attention than it got originally. It's really great.
Yes, no, right on, man. That was a big problem that the show unfortunately just couldn't answer, and it wasn't the show's fault because, again, MTV screwed it up so badly, but at the core, it really is, like you said, it's all about Peter. It does things that the 90s show did, that Spectacular would do, but it just did it in spades, and it was trying to be different. It was trying to be different, but it still knew, at the end of the day, this is Peter Parker's story. This is Spider-Man's story. So the fact that it has gotten a cult following over the years, and people have been hammering that they want this show to come back because Spectacular Spider-Man at least got a second season. So that's something you really can't take away from Spectacular Spider-Man is, okay, it got a second season. I mean, it may not have been as good as the first season, but it was still a good second season. And the original 90s Spider-Man, it had like 5 seasons. But this show, it only had 1. And there was still enough for it to have a multi-season story and really dive into things that I don't think... I mean, eventually Spectacular would have covered, but I think it would have done it before that. And I really would like to see, okay, if we brought it back now, I do think, yes, you are right that since there's unfortunately a lot of factors going into this, it would most likely have to be a reboot. But I think that's even better because this way, Mainframe can now start over again and really get their creative juices flowing into finding a new voice for this character, but keeping it familiar for you and me who saw what this character was. And the one thing I would definitely like this has always been a dream of mine, but I've wanted to see what Harry's reaction would be in this universe, finding out that his best friend is Spider-Man and that he indirectly killed his father. So that's one storyline that I would really like them to tackle if it was to come back for a second season, because I feel like it could do it a little bit more better than the third film because of all of these things that were tacked onto it. But with this, there is no tack-ons. It's able to explore what is going through Harry's mind. How is he going to deal with this? Is he going to become the Goblin? Or is he just going to be content with his best friend?
That would be amazing. Like, there's so many possibilities